Hi, I'm Sarah Hammerker, Crosswalk.com contributing writer. Today I'm going to walk you through my article, 8 Tips for Disciplining Your Child. And I'd like to start with a question. Why do we correct our children? Why do we discipline our children? Why do we care if they misbehave? Besides that, sometimes that can get on our nerves, or we don't want them breaking things or being a disruption. Really, why? Think about why we discipline our children. I think there are 2 reasons: to make help a child feel bad or uncomfortable about what he did, because they don't always, and to be a deterrent against future wrongdoings. Kids sometimes don't feel bad about misbehaving, and we want them to develop that conscience, to help develop that sense of right and wrong. And they should also serve as a check. Discipline should also serve as a check to help kids not do something again in the future. Now, I have 2 quick reminders. One is that no matter how faithful you are in disciplining your children, your child is still capable of doing something depraved, disgusting, and despicable on any given day. In other words, your kid's going to misbehave, and sometimes in a way that will shock you. This isn't because we failed, but because of the sin nature we all have, including our children. And second, that when a child misbehaves and you respond with an appropriate consequence, it's entirely possible the child will continue to misbehave. In other words, your kid can still choose to do the wrong thing, even when we're consistent, even when we're loving, even when we're doing all the right things. And that is just hard, and our kids' hearts can get hard, and only God can reach them at that point. So here are 8 tips for disciplining your child. Discipline tip 1, do what you can when you can. We often make a mistake as parents by rushing into punishment when we're mad, because sometimes our kids do things that make us angry or frustrated. This is when we're likely to say things like, "You're grounded until you're 18" to our first grader. I mean, that's ridiculous. Except for a 2 or 3-year-old, we can delay punishment for our children. If you're in the store and your kid misbehaves, you can just redirect and go on, and then address it when you get home if your kid is older than 3, because they've developed a long-term memory at 3. So they can remember what they did in the store. A 4-year-old can remember what he did in the store when you get home an hour later. Discipline number 2. Tip number 2, have a variety of consequence options. We should not do the same thing. We shouldn't worry about to use the same thing over and over with our kids, because not all children will respond the same way to punishment. So we ought to mix it up. Our kids should not know what we're going to do. They should just know that mom or dad is going to do something they don't like. Discipline tip number 3, never threaten, just deliver. Save your time, save your breath, don't threaten. Your children do not need warnings to straighten up. Once is enough. So stop saving your breath. Save your breath and don't threaten. Deliver. Discipline tip number 4, mean what you say and say what you mean. My kids know that if I say not to do X, I mean not to do X. And that if they do X, there's going to be a consequence they don't like. I don't waste time with saying over and over again, well, yeah, if you do that, then I might do something, or promise. No, I say what I mean what I say. Makes me a mean mom, but I'm happy with that because I save myself a lot of hassle in the long run. Discipline tip number 5, know your children. This might seem counterintuitive to discipline, but for a consequence to be effective, we need to know what our kids enjoy. What makes them smile? What do they spend their free time doing? What after-school activities do they enjoy? These will be fodder for effective discipline, which brings us to discipline tip number 6, be willing to make your child unhappy. It's hard when our kids are unhappy, but in order to guide them into civilized members of society, we have to be willing to make them unhappy at times. Here's how it relates to discipline. When our oldest, who's now a college sophomore, was in 5th grade, one of her daily chores was to replenish the cat's water. We have 2 cats. However, she kept forgetting to do that. So I was tired of nagging, tired of our cats being thirsty. I thought about what made her happy. So when she came home from school, I had a 30-day chart on the fridge and with her name on it. Naturally, she said, "What is that for?" And I said, "I'm glad you asked. When you refill the cat's water for 30 days straight without a prompting from mom or dad, you can get your books back." Wails of dismay. She loved reading. Reading was what she did and spent her free time at. 30, did you think she missed a whole one day in 30? No. Do you think she missed any subsequent days? No. It was effective because I was willing to make her unhappy in the short term for a long-term gain. Discipline tip number 7. Review your connection with your child. This is so important. Maybe I should have made it discipline tip number 1. If we're constantly correcting our kids, we have lost something in our relationship with them. We need to renew that relationship. So if you're having to correct a particular child or all your children in your home constantly, and I mean constantly, take a step back, stop discipline, and reconnect with them. Make sure that you are having more positive interactions with your kids than negative ones. Discipline tip number 8. End every discipline session that you possibly can with love. If you get nothing else from this video, I hope that you'll take this. Every time we have to correct our children is a time that we need to remind them of our love. They won't always be receptive in the moment, but it's important they hear those words from us. I also remind my kids that one of the ways I love them is disciplining them. That's what I'm called to do. I love them too much to allow them to continue on a path that leads to destruction. So discipline has its roots in the word disciple. So when you think about disciplining your children, think about that you're trying to make them disciples of Christ ultimately. Keeping this in mind will guide you along your discipline journey with your child.